ancient Ford pickup shuddered as Marcus Hayes pulled onto the gravel shoulder, dust rising in lazy clouds behind him. Route 47 stretched endlessly in both directions, shimmering under the relentless Arizona sun like liquid silver. A state trooper's cruiser sat ahead, hood propped open like a wounded bird, emergency lights painting lazy circles in the brutal daylight. The temperature gauge in Marcus's truck read 104 degrees, but he barely noticed anymore. Arizona heat was just another fact of life, like loneliness or overdue bills. Marcus didn't think twice. 39 years of living had taught him that when someone needs help on a desert highway, you stop. No questions asked, no hesitation. He grabbed his weathered toolbox from the truck bed, the metal handle warm against his calloused palm, and started walking across the shimmering asphalt. But when the officer turned around, removing his aviator sunglasses, Marcus felt the ground shift beneath his boots. That face, those eyes, the jawline that had aged a decade but remained unmistakable. Officer Ryan Caldwell. The name hit Marcus like a punch to the sternum. Suddenly, he wasn't standing on a highway anymore. He was back in that fluorescent hospital corridor 7 years ago, holding his newborn son while his wife lay 3 rooms away, already gone. A drunk driver had run a red light at 70 miles per hour. Sarah Hayes never saw it coming. Ryan Caldwell had been the trooper assigned to the case, the one who stayed past his shift, working through dinner, while his own family waited. Who tracked down the driver when everyone else had gone home for the weekend? Who looked Marcus in the eye and said, "I'm sorry this happened," like he actually meant it, like those words cost him something real. Not the rehearsed condolences of someone checking boxes, but genuine human grief for a stranger's pain. Marcus had never forgotten that voice, steady as bedrock when his entire world was collapsing. Now they stood 15 feet apart on scorching asphalt, separated by years and a busted radiator, connected by a tragedy neither had ever truly left behind. "Need some help?" Marcus heard himself say, his voice rougher than intended. Ryan's eyes narrowed, studying him. Recognition flickered there, uncertain at first, like a distant memory trying to surface. Marcus knelt by the cruiser before the moment could stretch into something unbearable, focusing on the engine because engines made sense. Engines had problems you could solve with the right tools and enough patience. Unlike everything else, the radiator hose had split clean through, a simple fix that would take maybe 20 minutes if he worked slowly, stretched it out to avoid conversation. Marcus worked in silence, hyper-aware of Ryan's presence behind him, the weight of unspoken history pressing down like the desert heat. His hands moved automatically, wrench, clamp, hose, repeat, while his mind spun through those nightmare weeks after Sarah's death. The endless nights with baby Jacob crying, inconsolable, as if he understood something terrible had changed, the bills piling up faster than he could count them. The crushing loneliness of single parenthood he'd never prepared for, never imagined he'd face alone. Marcus Hayes. Ryan's voice cut through his thoughts. Not a question, a statement of recognition. Marcus's hands stilled on the wrench. He didn't look up, didn't trust himself to meet those eyes again. "Yeah," he managed. "It's me." The silence that followed felt enormous, packed with 7 years of grief and gratitude and guilt that neither man knew how to voice. A semi-truck roared past, buffeting them with wind and diesel fumes, but neither moved. Marcus tightened the final clamp with more force than necessary, then stood, wiping his blackened hands on an old rag he kept tucked in his back pocket for exactly these moments. "All set," he said, still not quite looking at Ryan. "Should get you back on the road." "Marcus, wait." Something in Ryan's tone made him pause, made him turn back, despite every instinct screaming to get in his truck and drive. When he finally looked up, he saw exhaustion carved deep into the trooper's face. Lines that hadn't been there 7 years ago, deep grooves around his eyes and mouth, gray creeping into his temples. The particular weariness of someone who'd carried too many other people's tragedies for too long, who'd seen too much death on these highways. "I never forgot," Ryan said quietly. "That case, your son. I think about it more than I probably should." Marcus felt something crack open in his chest, something he'd kept sealed tight for years. "You found him," Marcus said. "The driver. When nobody else was looking, you found him." Ryan nodded slowly. "Didn't bring your wife back, though." "No," Marcus agreed. "But it mattered. You mattered." Ryan reached into his cruiser and pulled out his wallet, fingers fumbling slightly as he extracted a worn business card, edges soft from years of handling. He handed it to Marcus, who read it with growing confusion, his grease-stained fingers leaving prints on the white cardstock. Desert Hope Community Fund, a local charity that provided emergency assistance to families in crisis. "I don't understand," Marcus said. "7 years ago, I put your name in," Ryan explained, his voice steady but quiet, "for help, childcare assistance, grocery vouchers, utility payments when you were behind. You probably thought it was some random welfare program, some bureaucratic system, but it wasn't random. I made sure you got support when you needed it most, when you were too proud or too tired to ask." The card trembled in Marcus's hand. He remembered those mysterious vouchers arriving in the mail during those first desperate months, the anonymous assistance that had kept him and Jacob afloat when he was drowning. The gift cards for groceries when his fridge was empty, the daycare subsidies that let him keep working. He'd assumed it was standard procedure, government aid, something impersonal and bureaucratic that he'd qualified for automatically. It hadn't been impersonal at all. "Why?" Marcus's voice cracked on the word. Ryan looked out at the highway, at the heat waves rising like ghosts, at the endless stretch of asphalt that had witnessed countless tragedies and small miracles. "Because I've seen too many families fall apart after tragedy. Good people who just needed a little help to stay standing. Because I could help, so I did. Because that's what we're supposed to do for each other, even if nobody's watching, especially when nobody's watching." Marcus couldn't speak. His throat had closed completely. He stood there holding a business card and a dirty rag, feeling 7 years of self-reliant pride crumbling into something softer, something that felt dangerously close to hope. All this time, he'd told himself he'd survived alone, built himself back up through sheer determination. He'd been wrong. "Thank you," he finally whispered, his voice breaking. "For everything. For then. For now. For not forgetting us when you could have. For stopping when you could have kept driving." "You're the one who stopped," Ryan pointed out, a hint of a smile touching his weathered face. "I was just standing here with a busted radiator." They shook hands, both grips firm and lasting a moment longer than necessary. Calloused mechanic's hands meeting a trooper's steady grip. No more words were needed. Some debts couldn't be repaid, only acknowledged and carried forward into the next act of kindness, the next moment of choosing compassion. Marcus drove away with his vision blurred, pulling over 2 miles down the road just to collect himself, to let the tears come in private. He sat in his truck, air conditioning blasting, staring at that business card, and thinking about all the times he'd believed he was surviving alone. How that belief had hardened him, made him distant even from Jacob, unwilling to accept help or show vulnerability. How pride had nearly destroyed what Sarah's death hadn't. What a fool he'd been. That evening, Marcus picked up Jacob early from his friend's house and took him to the diner they used to frequent with Sarah, a small place with cracked vinyl booths and the best pie in the county. They sat in their old booth by the window, ordered too much food like they used to, and Marcus did something he hadn't done in 7 years. He talked about Sarah, really talked about her. Not as a wound that wouldn't heal, but as a person worth remembering, worth celebrating. Her terrible singing voice that she inflicted on them during road trips, her obsession with rescue dogs, and her dream of opening a shelter someday. The way she'd laugh so hard at her own jokes that she'd snort, which would make her laugh even harder, a beautiful cycle of joy that Marcus had forgotten existed. Jacob listened with wide eyes, soaking up memories of a mother he barely remembered, and Marcus realized he'd been protecting the wrong thing all these years. He'd been so focused on protecting Jacob from pain that he'd denied him the joy of knowing who Sarah really was. The laughter, the love, the legacy that mattered more than the tragedy. "Dad?" Jacob said, ketchup on his chin. "Are you okay?" Marcus smiled, really smiled. For the first time in recent memory. "Yeah, buddy. I think I finally am." The weeks that followed brought small changes that accumulated into something transformative, like drops of water slowly filling an empty well. Marcus started volunteering at a local garage that fixed cars for low-income families, paying forward the kindness he'd received. He joined a single-parent support group at the community center, finally admitting he needed help. He called his sister, who'd been trying to reach him for months, and actually answered her questions honestly. He said yes when a neighbor invited him to a barbecue instead of making excuses. He stopped just surviving and started living again. One morning, a letter arrived at the garage. No return address, just his name on the envelope in careful handwriting. Inside was a single handwritten note on plain white paper. "Thank you for stopping. For reminding me why I became a trooper in the first place. Some encounters change us more than we realize. They remind us that this job isn't just about tickets and reports, it's about people, about showing up when it matters. Take care, Marcus. You and Jacob deserve every good thing coming your way. R.C." Marcus folded the letter carefully and placed it in his wallet next to a photo of Sarah holding newborn Jacob, both of them beaming at the camera in a moment of pure, uncomplicated joy. The kind of joy he'd forgotten existed but was slowly learning to feel again. That afternoon, as he locked up the garage, golden Arizona sunlight streaming across the parking lot and painting everything in shades of amber, Marcus understood something fundamental that had eluded him for 7 years. We're all connected in ways we can't see, in invisible threads of kindness that hold us up when we're falling. The kindness we show ripples outward, touches lives we'll never know about, comes back to us when we least expect it and most desperately need it. Some faces are unforgettable not because they remind us of pain, but because they represent moments when humanity chose compassion over indifference. When someone decided that another person's suffering mattered enough to act, to stay late, to make phone calls, to care when it would have been easier not to. Marcus climbed into his truck, started the engine with its familiar rumble, and headed home to make dinner with his son. The highway stretched before him, endless and shimmering, full of possibilities he'd stopped believing in years ago but was finally ready to embrace again. He was ready to believe again, ready to live again, ready to be the person Sarah had always seen in him, even when he couldn't see it himself.